Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for another Film Fanatic headquarters. Hope everyone's doing good. It is March 26th at 10:15. It's a Thursday morning. Pretty warm day today, so it's pretty nice. I don't have to turn the heat on in my music space for an hour or so before. We had a pretty big snowstorm the other day, and then we had, before the snowstorm, it got super warm. We had a couple of days where it was like, I think, 70 degrees, maybe even a little warmer at one point in the sun. A big part of my job of where I work at the Montessori school, I work in the aftercare, so I hang out with the kids all day or for a few hours after school before they get picked up. And so we try to spend as much time as we can with the kiddos outside, to burn off the energy and just have fun. There's a lot of really beautiful spots by the school that kids can hang out. And so that's a big part of the day. That's mainly what we do. And I remember that day where it was like in the 70s. I couldn't believe it. We were out front, and I had my winter clothes on, not realizing what the temperatures were going to be. And I'm like, before I know it, I just had a T-shirt on, and it was actually hot. And then the kids were complaining that they were too hot and sweaty, and so it was wild. And then we got another cold snap, and then we had that big storm, and now it seems like it's kind of on an even base of somewhat warmer weather. But anyway, spring is here technically. Tomorrow will be a week of it ushering in, or the actual time of spring, because it was last Friday, the first day. So it's getting there, I guess. But anyways, I hope everyone's doing good. Tomorrow night, Friday night, I'll be playing with Osmia at Hey Sailor. 7 o'clock. So if you're around, come on by. It should be a lot of fun. We're gonna debut a couple of new tunes, or at least one brand new song that we just started working on. So yeah, that'll be fun. And then on Saturday we have our next Quantum show at the American Legion Hall, and it's gonna be with the, or I should say, it's kind of this triple bill of music. It's like a series that this local band, Phil Hummer and the White Falcon, started probably about a year ago. Really great band, really cool, like rockabilly punk music. We actually did a show there with Osmia last year, and then also Bookhead Sweet Tooth played there. And I used to play with Phil and the White Falcons quite a bit. And then it was about a year or so where I wasn't able to do it, and I'm also gonna be playing with them on Saturday, so I'll be kind of doing double duty. But a lot of fun, and that show starts at 7 o'clock, and it's at the American Legion Hall in Belfast. Really, really great spot. Got a huge stage, big dance floor. So yeah, so come on by if you're around. Anyways, I've been doing all kinds of, still been cranking out the Friday 13th videos. Thanks again to all of the support for this channel, the new people who have been subscribing. Got some new subscribers this week. Also, want to thank all the new folks also commenting on a lot of the videos. I do respond to all of the comments. I really, really appreciate that. That's really what it's all about for me. Also, haven't it's been a day or two. I haven't been able to respond to some of the comments, but I will be doing that. I take the time to do it all the time. I always get a little bit, I guess, kind of annoyed when I see, people that have YouTube channels, and a lot of people, spend time putting nice comments, or just, getting involved with the conversation. And I always think it's kind of weird when people don't respond back, especially the content creators, because that's what it's all about. And I understand, things get hectic, and when you're dealing with people who have YouTube channels where they have like thousands of followers, like that's a lot to keep up on. But still, you can take the time. So I'll respond to some. Got a handful of new comments. I'll be responding to them in a day or two. So, but keep them coming. Love it, love it, love it. So today's show, I started this new series. Again, continuing with my obsession with the Friday 13th series. I started this new series on trying to do a video on each actor slash stuntman who has played Jason Voorhees throughout the years. Today's show is going to be on Jason Goes to Hell, also starring Kane Hodder. This is the third of the four movies that he has been in the franchise. Kane Hodder's has a very, very unique place in the world of Friday the 13th, obviously, because he's the only actor slash stuntman who has played Jason numerous times, four times. So, pretty cool, pretty cool. I've always liked Kane Hodder. I've always liked the movies that he was in. A New Beginning, of course, being the first one, and then also Jason Takes Manhattan, also Jason Goes to Hell, which is going to be today's video, and then finally the Jason X, which is a wild movie. I really love them. All of those movies, especially I would say Jason X and Jason Takes Manhattan, which I did. I just uploaded that video today, I think, this morning. That was the one I just uploaded. Those movies I've always thought were okay. I never really, I guess, loved them fully like the other ones, like, say, The Final Chapter being my favorite. Also, I really love Jason Lives. All of the movies, part two, the very first one where it all started, the reboot. I don't know, for a long time I always thought Jason X and Jason Takes Manhattan were good. I've never had an issue with any of the movies in the franchise, but over the years I've seen both of those movies quite a bit. I just rewatched them again for, I don't know, the millionth time, and I've arrived to a place of where I absolutely love those movies. They're just so fun and exciting. And I've talked about this before. I feel like the franchise as a whole doesn't get the credit that it deserves for, taking an established IP, a character, and a world, Friday the 13th, and in this case Jason Voorhees, and the storyline, the narrative, the general story and narrative, and really, stepping the bat and taking some big swings. And I think the franchise has done that as a whole, as well as movies like that are not say directly apart, that are a little bit more on the separate, outside of the franchise as a whole, with like the reboot. I think I can kind of consider that a movie that is kind of on its own little strange little island, and also Freddy vs. Jason too, which is a really unique kind of thing. So I really have grown to love all of those movies. But today's show is on a movie that I've always been just totally knocked out by. And I think it's a really, really close, it's a really, really close fight for first place, second place, third place, fourth place. I'm pretty bad in general about making, lists of like my top 10 movies or my top 20, or some people do like their top 30 or 50 or 30 lists, like it's kind of crazy. I have my favorite movies, but and I can name like three or four usually fairly easily, but it's hard to do that. I my taste My enthusiasm for movies is always kind of going up all the time, but I'm always in this place of where just when I think I have a movie that I feel is the best one, I see another one, then I'm like, oh wow, that's really, really good. So my lists are always changing. I don't know. It's hard for me to make top 10 lists or top 20 lists. I generally don't do that. And that's a big thing in the world of YouTube. And I get it. But it's hard for me because it's always shifting. but overall, at the end of the day, Friday the 13th, the final chapter is my favorite. I would have to say. I got to see that in the theater and I was just like totally fucking blown away. That was amazing. And I also got to see part three before that in the theater, which was absolutely incredible as well. But examples, a couple examples of that kind of thing of where it always kind of changes for me. Last year and then just, again, really recently, I watched uh, Jason Lives, and that's a movie I've always liked, and that's the only movie I saw in the theater. But I was like, after I watched it, just recently, I'm like, this movie is just so awesome. Like, why isn't this movie more talked about? And it is, but it's not as talked about as, say, the first three or four films in the franchise. I'm like, this movie rules. It's got a very different tone. It's more of a it's kind of got this big kind of Universal Monsters vibe. So that one shifts has shifted for me tremendously. And another movie, today's movie, and then in this case, Jason Voorhees' character played by Kane Hodder, and this is the third movie that he did in his career. Jason Goes to Hell. This movie is just complete and utter. It's totally bonkers. It's so crazy. I think it's the most in the franchise as a whole. I think it's the craziest movie. I think it's the most gonzo. The special effects are just absolutely incredible. I think it does rival the amazing, iconic work of Tom Savini. This movie was not embraced by the public at all when it came out. Jason Takes Manhattan bombed in the box office, and over the subsequent years, it's grown to be really popular, and it's grown for me. I always thought that movie was okay. I never was at a place where I didn't like it, but that movie has grown a lot for me over the years. I actually really love it. I think that movie actually has some of the best kills, particularly in the boxing scene. So, and also when Jason Voorhees, like the end at the end of the film, what happens to him with the toxic waste sludge, where it kind of dissolves and melts his body, just crazy and amazing. And Jason Goes to Hell, there were fans of that movie right away, but not enough to where it was a success in the box office. That movie fucking bombed in the box office. But again, probably even more so, Jason Goes to Hell has been really embraced by a lot of people over the years. And after watching that movie, I'm like, this is the best movie in the franchise. Every time I watch that movie, I'm always like, at the end of it, I'm like, this is the best Friday 13th movie. So again, catch me on a different day, and I'll always say something different. So that's why I can't really. I just love them all, and some of them have certain things about them. When it comes to Jason Goes to Hell, I just love that they really, took the whole story and kind of like turned it up on its head and just really did something new and unique. So and it also has a real big kind of science fiction vibe. I've always thought that movie was really, whether or not it's true or not, but I've always felt like that movie was inspired by The Thing, John Carpenter's The Thing. So, and it's so different. The practical effects are just amazing. The kills in Jason Goes to Hell they're just wild. I love the whole opening sequence of where this epic battle scene between this SWAT team that finally tracks down Jason Voorhees and shoots him, annihilates him, and then blows up his body. Like, it's just so wild and crazy. And then the whole morgue scene of when he becomes this like disembodied organism that invades other people and takes over their bodies. It's just wild, and I absolutely think this movie is. I think it's a masterpiece. I really do. And again, it's another example, and I've said before, Kane Hodder was always somebody I have always liked a lot, and I've always loved his portrayal of Jason Voorhees. And I've always said that I'm still, at the end of the day, probably a Ted White guy, of course, who played Jason in the final chapter. Just always loved his kind of menacing demeanor when playing that character. Just very, I don't know, just really, just so badass and just in your face, really aggressive. And the trickiest thing for anyone playing, for any of these great actors, and in this case, Kane Hodder, playing Jason, I mean, when you have this iconic, established killer who doesn't say anything, there's no dialogue, pretty miraculous how an actor can pull that off and make the character so still really engaging and obviously at the end of the day the main part of the story and make that interesting. I mean, that's a fucking challenge. So I feel like Kane Hodder and a lot of these actors never, you know, have been given the credit for having that, real actually, some real serious acting chops, if you will, to pull that off because that's kind of insane when you think about it. And Kane Hodder I've always liked, but since over the years I've watched these four movies a lot more over time, and I absolutely love Kane Hodder. Now I've arrived at this new place where I have even more of a deeper respect and deep love and admiration for him as Jason and his ability to really do something new and different with each film in the series. And I think Jason Goes to Hell is one of those movies. He's actually Kane Hodder actually plays well. He plays there's a comedic element to Jason Goes to Hell. To me, it's like, I mean, they're all of the movies in the franchise are slasher movies without a doubt. They all totally check the box. All the they check all the boxes in that department. They're full on slasher movies, and they're definitely all exploitation movies. But there's something about Jason Goes to Hell that makes it even more kind of a B movie or even more of an exploitation just because of it's got such a great level of humor in it. There is some really it's got some funny shit in it that is just like outrageous. And we every time I watch it I'm like laughing out loud. In particular, like the main guy, the main character, Stephen Williams, who is in this movie, who is kind of like one of the main characters. He is so fucking funny in this movie, and there are scenes in this movie with his dialogue that are just like piss your pants. Like it's full on comedy, and I love that Jason Goes to Hell has this pure balance of all of those things. It's definitely the funniest and probably the most insane of the entire series. And Kane Hodder is amazing in this film. I really do feel like he knocked it out of the park. I think probably out of the four movies he was in, I almost like I like these movies the most. I like this movie the most, and I think his role, even though he's in it a little bit less, he's fantastic. I love when he plays himself more or less, but Kane Hodder is in this movie for a brief second where he plays this security cop guy, and he's super fucking funny in it, like really funny. You would never think or know that was Jason Voorhees. And it was directed by Adam Marcus, who is a really talented director, still really active, just a really prolific director. He's done a lot of great horror, like low budget horror films, but he's also branched out into many other kinds of genres. Just tremendous, tremendous guy. But Kane Hodder rocks. This movie, I can't recommend this movie enough. If you've never seen it, and I think for my money, it's probably the best movie with Kane Hodder in the Friday the 13th series, and it came out in 1993. So, just wild. It's interesting how these movies followed the same trajectory, but kind of polar opposite from the first four movies, which were massively successful. And then these movies were kind of like in you know, uh, a, a New Blood, Jason Takes Manhattan, especially when Jason Takes Manhattan came out, and then also with Jason Goes to Hell. These movies came out in a very kind of dire time for horror in general. At this point in the 90s, late 80s, early 90s, horror was kind of dying. As far as, I mean, you always had the hardcore fans, like myself, that were always into watching the shit, and always going to the movies to see these movies to see them, and then also renting these movies on VHS and DVD, because this was at the very very beginning stages of DVD. I have Jason Goes to Hell on DVD. I actually have a really good edition of it, but I definitely needed to seriously get an upgrade, without a doubt. But commercially, horror kind of tanked. Like, it wasn't really. It didn't have the genre itself. Really didn't have the box office clout that it had at one point, and it was really taking a hit. And I never thought at that point that like horror was going to go away, but it was, that like people were going to wake up one day and just stop making horror movies. But as far as like, it went from this big thing with studios when the slasher genre exploded in the 80s. You had all these independent kind of low budget exploitation directors directing these movies, but then these movies were really successful, and the slasher genre just exploded in the 80s. Really, really due to the Friday series franchise. And then you had this thing of where, major studios started getting involved. Paramount was putting out the Friday 13th movies, a major studio, one of the biggest. So, and you had a lot of these independent directors doing all kinds of slasher films, but then I think, obviously the major studios saw that these movies were making a lot of money, so a lot of people were cashing in. And then it ran its course, and a lot of these movies went away. And it wasn't really until when Wes Craven released the first Scream movie where suddenly that ignited the whole box office again, and it was huge. And ever since then, horror has been, it just exploded, the genre of horror. And I think today it's very safe to say that today, and even 2026, that the horror genre is bigger than ever. I mean, the amount of horror movies that come out all the time. I mean, 2025 was an extraordinary year for horror films, and 2024. So, yeah. And Jason Goes to Hell and also Jason Takes Manhattan came out at a really tough time for horror because it was dwindling. But thanks again, and we'll see you next time. Peace.